Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom, a cult classic that is said by many to be the best game out of the massive collection of SpongeBob video game titles, even to the point of it being treated as a necessity on every console it released on. Despite this, during its life cycle the game went quiet for quite a while until speedrunning brought it back into existence once more, and was pretty much the entire reason a remake for the game even happened from seemingly out of nowhere. If you don't believe me, trust me, go watch these videos on the 80% speedrun history for the game. These videos do way more justice of explaining the entire situation and progression than I ever could in the amount of time I do my videos, and there's still more of these documentaries on the way. They are long, but they are really good and show how much love was put into the game by the community. However, the original game was treated poorly by critics, and that trend continued onward into the remake. A lot of people just didn't take this game seriously, as there were a lot of license-based games that were just thrown out into the void for a quick cash grab. But even then, there's not many of them that have a strong community backing like this. So with such a diversity of opinion, today I'll be looking at SpongeBob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated and see just why the original version of the game became the cult classic that it is, and if the remake justifies all of the hype that resurfaced what many have claimed as a childhood gem. Plankton, as per usual, has a plan to get the Krabby Patty secret formula, his plan being to use a robot duplicator to invade the Krusty Krab. However, there's just one problem with this plan. He forgot to make sure that it wasn't on the not obey setting. Why would you even design it like that? Anyways, SpongeBob and Patrick think that they are the cause of the robots because they wish to play with real robots using Patrick's magic wishing show, with actual robots appearing the next morning all over Bikini Bottom. Now they must deal with the robots and help Plankton get back into the chum bucket so that they can end up shutting everything down. The plot is extremely simple and in some ways a little dumb, but it's the kind of dumb that a cartoon like SpongeBob would allow. Evidence being the show itself doing stuff like this time and time again, so it's incredibly fitting for the game to have a similar take on its story. This is even more enforced by the extremely bizarre and convoluted tasks that are asked of you to accomplish by the cast of characters in plenty of well-known locations all throughout Bikini Bottom. Speaking of the cast, the interactions among them are the majority of this game's story. Like I said before, the story is simple. The general plot doesn't really change at all as you go through it. Because of that, the strongest point of this game's story is the interactions, as they can make or break the entire game. What's my opinion of them? They are great. Many of them I found hilarious even after seeing them for the dozenth time. The utilization of most SpongeBob material and characters is also amazing, save for Pearl, Karen, one-off characters, and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy villains. That last part is remedied with an exclusive villain for this game, at the very least, and you even get to see the fish reporter, which I don't think many SpongeBob games have done. But all in all, the story works very well for this game. Just a very cartoonish story for a very cartoonish series. I mean, do you really need more than that? The graphical upgrade to the game looks fantastic. So much color is added to everything and gives honestly a perfect representation of how Bikini Bottom looks with every location you go to. It's helped even more by the descriptions given for each location done by the narrator from the show. Plus, being able to actually see other locations of Bikini Bottom while you are in other areas is really cool, showing that these places are connected by more than the new quick travel map, which looks great by the way, and a loading screen. Speaking of, some loading screens have the classic bubble transition that SpongeBob is known for. A very nice detail that I very much appreciate. The boost given to characters is just as good, especially with the new animations for them during text cutscenes. They add so much flavor and charm that makes some scenes even better than they originally were, aside from one scene in particular. They will never be able to beat the original version of this. Honestly, this boost to text scenes was pretty needed. It really shows the age of the game more than the environments did. The original as a whole graphically wasn't bad, in fact it's one of the best looking SpongeBob games from back then, but man is the upgrade so pleasing to the eye. Now, I'm gonna point out that I played the Switch version of the game, which yes is the worst version of the game, but I wanted the Switch version just to have it on a Nintendo console like I did with the original. So, these are mainly just Switch differences, But Sand Mountain and certain areas in SpongeBob's Dream is noticeably bad on Switch compared to the rest of the game, and there are a few frame drops here and there. The new multiplayer mode, which I'll go over later, also gets really bad frame drops on this version, just yikes. While the game graphically is redone amazingly, and it really shows on the other versions of this game, most of the music and voice work isn't redone, at least not by much. For the music, that's not too bad because the songs are already great, and I'm pretty sure the music from this game is some of the most iconic SpongeBob game music, if not SpongeBob music in general. The songs are well deserving of a good listen outside of the game, especially as I think that's where you'll be able to tell the main difference of it sounding a lot sharper than the original version. And if I were to catch you listening to this song in your car, I jam out with you. This isn't the worst thing in the world either for the voice work, since almost every character has their original voice actors, and they do amazing jobs to boot. The only ones that don't have their actors reprise their roles are Mermaid Man, which makes sense, rest in peace, and Mr. Krabs.
What are you doing in Squidward's dream?
Hard time, boy. Or at least it feels like it.
And boy did Mr. Krabs need to be revoiced so badly. I'll admit he did a better job at least attempting to sound like the original character than Mermaid Man's voice actor.
Everything I own turned pink! Pink!
But it's still not Mr. Krabs. And one thing I must absolutely applaud on is the clear attention to the SpongeBob community due to the amount of memes that are put in. And this isn't just a thing of catering to the new fans. The original did have stuff like this here and there, so them doing this isn't exactly the most surprising thing in the world, especially since the internet usually gets a new SpongeBob meme at least once every 3 months. But the remake outright embraces it. Some are more subtle and just references episodes, like images in SpongeBob's house or the banners in the Poseidon, but there are also some that are way more recent than others, and you should know them if you're watching this. But being able to see and recognize most of them was a special treat for those who have watched SpongeBob growing up and are playing this game in this new experience. So again, very nice tell of love for the community through this. You control SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy as you go to various locations of Bikini Bottom collecting golden spatulas. Earning enough golden spatulas allows you access to other areas of Bikini Bottom as you work your way to getting into the chum bucket. Each character has a few similarities, such as the standard attack, double jump, and the ability to slide down slopes, but you will need to switch between them by using bus stops as they all have their own powers. SpongeBob is the one you'll play as the most, so he also has the most abilities. Starting out, he has the Bubble Bash, which shoots him upwards and can hit any object above him, while his Bubble Bounce sends him downwards from the air, attacking anything below him. In addition to that, he can also sneak around, which is useful for moving on certain platforms and maneuvering around certain enemies. In particular areas, there is a SpongeBob ball thing. Running into this turns SpongeBob into a ball, making him faster and allows him to go through areas he normally isn't able to. There are also hooks leading over usually bottomless pits. These are bungee jumps that let SpongeBob, bungee jump with his underwear. Saying that out loud, I can kinda see why people didn't take this game seriously. As you proceed through the game, you'll face some bosses, and after beating them, SpongeBob obtains some new bubble moves. The Bubble Bowl allows SpongeBob to roll a bubble like a bowling ball, which is used as a projectile and can hit buttons that other projectiles and attacks can't hit. The Cruise Bubble sends out a bubble missile, which you can fly into out of reach switches and enemies. Patrick's Face Slam move can be used to press buttons as well as stun nearby enemies. This lets him pick up, carry, and throw enemies, though he is able to throw normal objects without the Face Slam to reach buttons. Sandy has a rope, which is used to lasso enemies in crates, glide through the air, and swing on floating Texas things. Aside from the golden spatulas, there are 2 more collectibles. One of them, which is located everywhere in the game, are shiny objects, and enough of these are used to open up areas within locations or can be brought to Mr. Krabs for a golden spatula. The other are socks that are hidden in particular spots or after doing a certain objective. Collecting 10 of these can get you a golden spatula after giving them back to Patrick for his sock collection. And then, the brand new content to the game is the multiplayer mode, where 2 people choose between 7 characters and battle through a gauntlet of increasing enemies in variously designed sections, all having hazards. This can be played locally or online, though for this footage I played this with my brother, so shout out to him for helping me with this. All 3 playable characters feel unique and different in the game. Their differences are shown off and utilized in every level. Many areas enforce the use of multiple characters as they give access to different sections, spatulas, and collectibles throughout the game. Some enemies also have this in mind, such as requiring the use of one of their unique mechanics to beat them, whether it be sneaking, throwing an object, or lassoing them. Most of the boss fights even make sure you use their abilities to get through them. I do wish Patrick and Sandy also learned new moves similar to the Spongebob movie game, and yes, I do know that the movie game is based on this game's engine and assets before a bunch of people bring that up. Just saying, I'd like that for this game too, but that's not going to hinder my experience with this game. But that's more of a general positive that could apply to both the original and remake versions. The updates to gameplay in the Rehydrated version are great aside from one thing that I'll mention later. The most notable changes being SpongeBob sneaking having a button, which even applies to air movement surprisingly, Patrick now having an air attack since he didn't originally, allowing him to defeat certain enemies without throwing things and get through areas with a lot less struggle, Sandy's attacks being faster and or longer reaching, making playing as her better than before, the fast travel having a visual hint for the spatula you go to, and some enemies having different attacks entirely, which are way better than before. They are mostly quality of life changes, but all of these tiny changes add up and make the experience all the better. There are also 100 spatulas that can be obtained, allowing for a lot of different options for what you want to try and go for. For those wondering, this is kinda what I was talking about with the movie game when I complained about the locked off progression. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you watch that so you have context for the argument that I'm bringing up now. This also means there's extra content depending on how completely you play the game. Some spatulas being tied to shiny objects and socks promotes exploration of each area, along with the spatulas themselves. There's even some health upgrades that can be found in the central hub worlds if you look for them. Fast travel helps immensely with all of this, and thank goodness, because I imagine that going through this game would be a lot more annoying without it. The secret ending can only be gotten by getting every other spatula before beating the final boss. This is fair, it makes sense as there is still other stuff to do, so more robots would still be around, and even the game says this, and other games have done similar things too. As long as you meet a certain requirement when you fight or refight the final boss, you're able to get whatever ending. The problem is, you can't refight the final boss, and you very likely are not going to get every single spatula before beating the game, unless you already knew about this prior. You can even refight the other robo bosses in the game, including the outside portion of the final boss, but not the inside, which is needed to get the secret ending. You beat the boss already? Too bad, you gotta replay the game in its entirety to get the secret ending. But it was like that in the original, some of you are probably saying, and to that I say, wouldn't it be a quality of life change to not have to replay the entire game for an ending that's not even different for the situation and a scene of the characters singing the theme song, and that's it? I think that would be a nice quality of life change. Sure, things are like that originally, but it doesn't have to stay that way, given the updates that were made with the gameplay that I mentioned earlier. Then, the multiplayer mode. It's a boring and repetitive one that lasts about 40 minutes. This wouldn't be too bad, especially with there being a decent selection of playable characters, if almost all of the major scrap concepts from the original game wasn't thrown into this game mode. The robot Squidward boss, a phase for the robot SpongeBob fight, Patrick's dream of platforming on candy and ice cream, and heck, maybe this is a blessing, but Glove World isn't even in the game as far as I can tell. If it were put into the game, it'd just end up here. I mean, we're talking full levels and boss fights here. It is a big shame too, especially after Purple Lantern hyped up the cut content being put into this mode, only for it to end up being really mediocre. I'm glad my brother decided to play this game mode with me because you can only get through this with a friend. It's just incredibly dull. The bungee controls feel very odd. This is the one update to the gameplay that I find really weird. And at first I thought this was just a me thing until I saw other reviewers talk about it, and yeah, this is just a thing. It feels more stiff and almost unresponsive sometimes. It doesn't make sense to change it either since it was just fine in the original game and the movie game, which uses the same engine. Thankfully, you're able to complete the challenges involving these with little annoyance, and you often don't use it for very long. But again, it's one of the changes that just doesn't make sense to me. And also, for a time, this game had an issue with its inverted camera controls. If you had set it to inverted and you switched to another character or had a loading screen of any kind, the controls would turn into the normal setting even when inverted was set, resulting in you having to go into the settings and change it again. Now yes, this has been fixed, and I'd be more upset about this had it not been dealt with at all, but it took a month to fix a problem that shouldn't have even been in the game to begin with. Honestly, this game is very lucky for this part to not be in the bad section. The only reason it didn't go into the bad section is because I just didn't beat the game fast enough. That's literally the only reason. This is a great title to own, especially if you are a Spongebob fan, which should be all of you watching this video. If you're not a Spongebob fan to some extent, I'm gonna assume you've committed a terrible crime at some point. The original game was amazing in its own right, but Rehydrated gave an impressive graphical upgrade with all the same fun content to complement it. Unfortunately, the new content, being the multiplayer, isn't really up to snuff compared to the rest of the game. So really, this game was kinda just meant to be a single player game, and that's about it. But I do highly recommend this game to everyone, but if you are going to get it, get any version that is not the Switch version. PC is the top priority, then PS4, then Xbox if you have that for some reason, and if you really have no other options, get the Switch version. But just like the original games where they were all necessities for whatever console you got them on, Rehydrated is a necessity for whatever console you have now. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. So I finally covered Battle for Bikini Bottom. Thank goodness. And I was somewhat able to kill two birds with one stone because people have asked me to do Battle for Bikini Bottom before, and then the remake got announced, so I was like, well, I'm gonna have to do the remake then. And I'm just happy that I'm able to cover one of these major childhood games, because a lot of the ones that I cover have been leading a lot more towards niche. At least that's how I feel. There are some exceptions to that, but I feel like a lot of the games that I've played have been niche titles for license-based games. That sounds so weird saying out loud, but it's a thing. But I do want to know if you guys actually ended up playing the original game years back when it was originally released, or if you guys are just starting out with Rehydrated. But regardless, if you guys have not already, make sure you guys go down into the description because that's where all of my social medias are located. My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Discord are all in the description, and they are all ways for you guys to be notified of whenever I make or post any form of information about another video. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as share this video out with your friends and family. But until the next video, take care.